It's good to see you here tonight. Here, take this with you. It's good to see some people that weren't able to be here this morning tonight, and they recovered enough to be here. I thought for a minute Linda was going to be able to come today, but she's got resolute power of recovery because last night she looked like she was going to be down for a day or two, and today she's been strong as she could be. So I'm thankful for that. And I'm thankful that you've been able to come back and study with us the Word of God. You know, God has quite a sense of humor. I don't know if you've ever paid much attention to God's sense of humor or not. But if you haven't, I want you to turn and let's look at these verses again. In the book of Isaiah 46, and we're going to read God's declaration and his sarcasm of the gods of Israel. Baal boweth down, Nebo stoopeth. Their idols were upon the beast and upon the cattle. Your carriages were heavy laden. They're a burden to the weary beast. They stoop, they bow together. They could not deliver the burden, but themselves are gone into captivity. Now, if you're going to have a God, do you want one like this? They got burdens to carry, but they have to have cattle to put them on. They have to have idols that they can worship, but they have to put them on beasts of laden so they can carry them out to worship them. The burden is too heavy. They can't stoop down. They can't bow down. And if they do it together. But in doing anything that they do, they are not able to deliver the burden. They can't carry the load, but themselves are gone into captivity. Hearken unto me, O house of Jacob, and all the remnant of the house of Israel, which are born by me from the belly, which are carried from the womb. And even to you, your old age, I am he. And even to hoar hairs, that means gray hair, will I carry you. I have made, and I will hear. Even I will carry, and will deliver you. Now look at the difference between the God of Israel and the God that Israel was trying to serve. He said, listen to me, house of Israel. I have taken care of you. I have borne your burdens. I have borne your burdens from the belly, or from the time that you were born. I have carried you and taken care of you and provided for you from the womb. I'll do that even until your old age. I'm the one that'll do that. I'll take care of you until your hair turns white. And I'll carry you all through your life because I've made and will bear. And I will carry and deliver you. Now, what a difference between the gods that they were trying to serve and the gods that they were trying to emulate and the God that actually existed. Now, then I ask you a question. What about the God you serve? Can the God you serve bear your burdens? Can the God you serve carry you through all of your life? Can the God that you and I serve bear you through the time of trials and tribulations? Or are the gods that you are serving they who can't stoop, can't bow down, can't deliver you from the burden, because they themselves are held in captivity and nobody can deliver them? What do you think about somebody who would serve a God that couldn't speak? Let's go to verse 5. To whom shall ye liken me, God says. You've called them a God like me. You put them in the same line of thinking as you put me. You have compared me as equal to them. You've compared me with them. And you say, well, God is a God. They're all just alike. God said, are you for real? Do you really think that I fit in the same category of description and definition as the God you serve? They lavish gold out of the bag and weigh silver in the balance and hire a goldsmith, and he maketh it a god. They fall down, yea, they worship. They bear him on the shoulder. They carry him. He can't carry himself. He can't walk himself. Somebody got to carry him along. And set him in his place. Now, it's interesting. When they set him in his place, and he standeth, from his place shall he not move. You put him where you place him, and when you come back the next time, he's standing exactly where you put him. He can't move, he can't bend, he can't stoop, he can't do anything. And yet you call him a God, and you compare him to the great I am. Yea, one shall cry unto him, yet can he not answer, nor save him out of his trouble. Remember this, and show yourselves men. Bring it again to mind, O ye transgressors. Remember the former things of old. For I am God, and there's none else. I am God, and there's none like me. Declaring the end from the beginning, from ancient times, the things that are not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will do all my pleasure. Well, I call a ravenous bird from the east, the man that executeth my counsel from a far country. Yea, I have spoken it, and I will also bring it to pass. I have purposed it, and I will also do it. Hearken unto me, ye stout-hearted, that are far from righteousness. I bring near my righteousness, it shall not be far off, and my salvation shall not tarry, and I will place salvation in Zion for Israel, my glory. Compare me to a stick of wood that somebody has cut down and hewn to be like a god. Somebody that can't walk, move, transport himself. You have to carry on your own shoulder. And when you carry him and you set him in his place, when he comes back, he's still there because he can't move. Not only that, if you set him up erect, he'll be erect the next time you see him. He cannot recline and relax. And if there happens to be a situation where somebody needs some help, and they cry out to the God that they serve, he can't answer, nor can he save them out of his trouble. Compare that to the God of Israel. Unfortunately, man has an inclination to worship something. The object of an individual's worship will always vary from others, yet he will worship something or someone. There's a lot of people that don't think that what they're doing is worshiping another god. Often money is an object of the worship for some, and others elevate famous people. Accordingly, these worldly objects have a drawing interest to the people that serve them. But what should draw one to serve or worship God? Well, now let's go, since we're talking on the subject, to the book of Jeremiah. And we're going to see about the same thing, but it's interesting to me. The satire and sarcasm of the God of Israel just amazes me. Are you ready? Hear ye the word which the Lord speaketh unto you, O house of Israel. Thus saith the Lord, learn not the way of the heathen, And be not dismayed at the signs of heaven. For the heathen are dismayed at them. In other words, don't try to follow the signs of zodiac. Don't try to set yourself by the stars. Don't try to plant your this and that by certain things that you see. You can't figure them out. I made them to where you couldn't. I did that because I'm God. I want you to know that you can't depend on what you can do. You got to depend on me. For the customs of the people are vain. For one cutteth a tree out of the forest, the work of the hands of the workman with an axe. They deck it with silver and with gold, and they fasten it with nails and with hammers, that it move not. They are upright as the palm tree, but speak not. They must needs be born, because they cannot go. And you're afraid of them? Be not afraid or fall down before and worship them, for they cannot do evil, neither also is it in them to do good. For as much as there is none like unto thee, O Lord, thou art great, and thy name is great in might. Who would not fear thee, O King of nations? For to thee doth it appertain. Who is it that this would apply to, and it doesn't apply to the gods that you've served? For as much as among all the wise men of the nations, and in all their kingdoms there is none like unto thee, but they are altogether brutish and foolish. The stock is a doctrine of vanities. Silver spread into plates is brought from Tarshish, and gold from Uphaz. The work of the workman and the hands of the founder, blue and purple is their clothing. They are all the work of cunning men, but the Lord is the true God. He's the living God and an everlasting King. At his wrath the earth shall tremble, and the nations shall not be able to abide his indignation. It's kind of a sarcastic, caustic way of describing man, his God. There are some people that worship the bottle. There are some people that worship their job. There are some people that worship their automobile. There's some, and you know, of all the things that they worship, those things that they worship are inanimate. It might have been something that somebody cut out of a tree, and they put gold and silver on it. But even after they have lavished upon it that great wealth, it still can't move. It can't carry itself. It can't go anywhere. And there ain't no use for you to fear it. Because what are you fearing? A log that was cut from a tree? Many congregations of the Lord's church no longer look to the God of Israel, to the being who created and brought into existence the church of Christ for their strength. These have not proposed to consider the gospel as the power of God unto salvation. And this is an insult to God. The blood of Christ, they demonstrate, is not important enough for them to go and try to find the lost. So they moved to other methods of drawing the crowds. Entertainment. Congregations are turning into doing a lot of things that are amazingly cunning, but none of them are doing that which God commands. I read an article the other day somewhere where all of these great, wonderful churches that are growing so fast that nobody can ever count the number of people there are famous for their family life centers. Now that's what Jesus said. Go into all the world and establish family life centers in every congregation. Or they're favorite for their youth attractions and activities that they have. and the parents who cater to the entertainment needs of their children, which is especially common in today's society, attend these congregations for that reason. They can do that, but they should consider the placement of value they are portraying to their children. What are they showing them that's worthwhile in their life? In effect, these parents are saying to their children, do not be interested or even feel indebted to Christ. Worry about your own selfish wants. And in Isaiah 3, if you want to flip back over there, in Isaiah 3 and 4, the prophet Isaiah, again, sarcastically and caustically, says, I'll give children to be their princes, and babes shall rule over them. In other words, they won't use rhyme or reason or understanding to try to teach these children the gospel of Christ, because the children become their gods. The children will rule over them. They're the ones that will direct it. So they'll determine where they go and what they're taught by what the child likes instead of what God has said. Somehow, parents have misunderstood the position or function God has given them in the home. The child is not to raise the parents to raise the child. And the cross of Christ, it alone stands without much attention given to it. They don't think that it will function today like it should. They've considered that it won't draw men or women. Christ shed his blood to buy the church, and he provided the only way of salvation for us. But instead of trying to bear down, or as they say today, and this is a new common political phrase, instead of doubling down on the teaching of the plan of salvation, instead of preaching and teaching the gospel of Christ, they build gymnasiums and family life centers that have never done a thing for anybody. The misconception of drawing people with fulfilling their desires is all too similar to the idols of biblical times. God mocked the Israelites for their fascination with these idols. The people had overlooked how much of a burden these idols had become to them. Well, they bear him on the shoulder. They carry him. He doesn't carry them. And they set him in his place, and he standeth. And from his place shall he not move. Yea, one shall cry unto him, yet he cannot answer, nor save him out of his trouble. These people had to carry the idols around and invest costly materials to build them. And the idols couldn't even speak, nor do anything for them. Yet the Israelites thought that these idols could be and should be allowed, for they believed that God was in that idol, and if God was in that idol, he'd take care of the situation. Now, we could come up with all kind of concepts and ideas and paraphernalia to entertain and programs to induce people to come who have a desire to make sure that they are entertained. We can use the Lord's money to construct costly buildings and put up gymnasiums and maintenance buildings, and then pay the big pay or the big price to secure those maintenance buildings by paying the maintenance on the maintenance buildings. We can spend the time to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ and spend all of our time and effort in trying to teach men what the Lord said to do to be saved. We can use efforts for evangelism that the gospel administrates. We can be like those round about us and try to emulate and copy what they've done, because that has seemingly been successful. We can discover the one genuine way to convert a people to Christ or a person to Christ is by preaching him the gospel, instead of nourishing him with entertainment or giving him a Friday night meal, or allowing the women to go out at the expense of the church and entertain themselves, or draw the church members in to the worship assembly by not having them have any commitment to the church at all. They can come if they want to. They can stay at home if they want to. It's easy to seek better programs and bigger buildings, but the more often you switch to entertainment than to preaching the gospel, the more often you're changing the diet of the congregation with which and to which you worship. Christ told the Jews what would draw, but nobody's paid much attention. Jesus said, "Now no man can come to me except the Father draw him." Turn over to John 6. In John, the 6th chapter, and I believe it's about verse 44, Jesus said, "I'll tell you what's going to draw. No man can come unto me except the Father draw him. And if the Father don't draw him, he won't come unto me." John 6 and 44. You there? "No man can come to me except the Father which hath sent me draw him." Now, how is the Father going to draw? Is he going to entertain? Is he going to give you ice cream and cake? Is he going to make it to where that you can be socially involved? Or is he going to talk to you about what he did in a thing called love that will allow you to hear of this love and impress you with that love so that you are drawn because somebody loves you more than you love yourself? Nobody can come except the Father draw. And if the Father doesn't draw, what's going to happen? He said in the last day, when they who have come have not learned of the Father, they will be destroyed. Let's look at the verses again. "No man can come to me except the Father which has sent me draw him, and I will raise him up at the last day. It is written in the prophets, and they shall be taught of God. Every man therefore that hath learned and hath learned of the Father cometh unto me." You know how then to cause people to come to the services? You know how to cause them to fall in love with Jesus Christ? Teach them of the plan of the Father. Tell them of the love of God. Show them what God, before the foundations of time are thought, brought into existence that they can be saved. Allow them to hear that old story that's sweet and sure and guaranteed to be successful. For Jesus said, "Now, not that any has seen the Father, save he that is of God. He has seen the Father. Verily, verily, I say to you, he that believeth on me hath everlasting life." What are we going to do to impel, compel, invite? We sit down every once in a while in kind of a brain session to try to figure out what we're going to do to get people to come to the services, to get new people in, as we say, to bring people that have never come here before. And of course, it's wisdom to go to what the world has done to see what's successful and have that as an idea to see if we think that'll work. It's easy to see that there's some people that have been successful in that fashion in bringing people in. But how have they been successful in converting the heart? I was in a little place preaching one time in Michigan, And this congregation had brought a lot of people in. And when I went there to preach the gospel, they went into trauma. I mean, literal shock. And they couldn't believe that somebody would stand and teach that there's one church and but one, and that there's only one way to get to heaven, and that's Jesus Christ. And that their denominational friends who are not members of the Church of Christ are going to be lost and spend eternity in the fires of hell. What a horrendous thought that somebody would come up with the idea that there's only one way to be saved. Well, the first 2 or 3 nights of the meeting were pretty rough. But after the second or third night of the meeting had concluded, one day about 2 o'clock, there's this old woman came in. Just happened to be at the church building, and she came in and she said, "The preacher's not here. I want to talk to you." She sat down and began to tell me her story of salvation. She was the head of the women's Sunday school department. I listened to this fine lady tell me how she got on her knees and prayed to Jesus to be saved. And how that she later on, about 4 or 5 years later, heard a little bit about baptism and figured if it was good enough for Jesus, it's good enough for her. So she'd just go find somebody to baptize her too. And she ran into a member of the Church of Christ and had to ask them, she said 3 or 4 times, about baptism. And they said, "Oh yeah, we baptize." Well, she said, "Well, will you baptize me?" "Well, you'd have to go ask the preacher." Well, the preacher was glad to baptize her, so he baptized her. But she said, "You know, preacher, I've been listening to your preaching the last 2 or 3 nights. And it doesn't sound like that what I've done is pleasing to God Almighty. Would you tell me, am I saved?" About that time, the preacher came in, and you'd have thought that I was taking gold out of her pocketbook, that he had to keep her from me and keep us separated because he didn't want her to hear what I was going to say. She finally, bless her heart, just took her hand, moved him out of the way, and she said, "Sit down, son, and shut up. I came to find out what I must do." I explained to her the plan of salvation. Showed her how that you couldn't be baptized thinking you were already saved. And it do you a dime's worth of good except taking a religious bath. And if you didn't have a towel, you'd have left wet. Explained to her that the place where you meet the blood of Christ is in the watery grave of baptism. And something she'd never heard preached there. On this deal about the Lord's Supper she'd seen them participate in, she would miss it many times because she didn't know what it was, and she thought it was some kind of a rite that certain people had administered to them that other people couldn't participate in. That afternoon, we went and rented a horse watering trough. Well, you know why we had to do that? The baptistry had been closed up for 5 years. I walked back to where the baptistry was, and it had planks and boards nailed over it. And nothing had ever happened there for the last 15 years that anybody knew about. And it had gotten in such bad decay that nobody wanted to use it. Yeah, they'd go out to the creek when they'd save up enough, and they'd have their little baptizings. She said, "But according to what the Bible teaches, and you've shown me, you got to be baptized immediately." I said, "Yes, ma'am." She said, "There's no place here to be baptized. It gets kind of cold in Michigan." And it wasn't exactly cold then. It was in the summertime. And if you ever been to Michigan, they got some mosquitoes in Michigan that are so big, if one gets under this arm and the other gets under this arm, they can just fly you off. To go to those places and baptize somebody into Christ, you actually take your life in your hands. So we went and rented a horse watering trough and brought the horse watering trough in. And that day, that hour, that old woman confessed her faith in Jesus Christ as the Son of God. And she was buried with Christ in baptism and raised to walk to the newness of life. She said, you know, after she came out of the baptistry, if somebody had told me this 5 years ago, I'd have been thrilled to do this then. Before the end of the meeting, which lasted another 4 days, we baptized 34 people. Every one of them thought they were members of that congregation. They tried to entertain them in. They tried to give them special jobs. They tried to make it to where they could have their blessings from things that they thought would compel people to come to the services. They tried everything but the gospel of Jesus Christ. Now I find that there's a lot of churches of Christ that are doing that today. They want to try and they have programs and they want to talk about this and talk about that, but on what must I do to be saved, or what church will salvation place me in when I become a member, or whose church do I belong to, or is there just one way and but one, and there's nothing else right but God's way, you don't hear a lot said. And the church is dying because of ignorance. So it's according to what you want in this world. If you want somebody to give you a youth program that makes you feel good about your kids, or if you want to have a women's program that makes the women all do something that they shouldn't be doing to start with, or if you want to have dinners and suppers that invite people in, or you want to feed the area-wide people that are hungry, instead of feeding them the gospel, feed them food. Or if you want to do a lot of things that the world is doing to try to get people to come in, it can be done. I was talking to a guy this past week, and he said, well, let me tell you what this successful preacher is doing. I heard everything but the fact that he was preaching the gospel. No man can come to the Father but by me, Jesus Christ said. And no man can come to me except the Father which has sent me draw him. That's what Jesus said. It is a fact that cannot be refuted, that if we don't preach the word, not instant or continuous, all the time in preaching the word, the gospel of Christ will not be the reason that people attend where we assemble. And if that's true, the Lord won't be there either. It's a strange thing. I was in Pennsylvania one time to preach a meeting, and the elder that picked me up to take me to the services and I were talking on the way to the church building. And he was telling me that his wife wouldn't be there that day because she was an elder at the Presbyterian church. And therefore, she wouldn't be there to hear me preach. She would like to, but she wouldn't make it that morning. And would it be possible that I might speak to her during the week and try to get her to move her membership from the Presbyterian church to the Church of Christ? Now, this is one of the elders. I said, sir, how long has it been since you've heard the gospel preached? Well, our preacher preaches about psychology. He preaches about this. He preaches about all that. We just don't have time to get into those remedial things. I said, and when were you baptized into Christ and where? Well, he said, that's personal, and I wouldn't like to discuss it. I said, I'll do you a favor, help you out. You're taking me over here for me to preach where you are an elder, correct? Yes. I said, you ought to just pull over and let me out. I'll find my way home. Because when I get done preaching this morning, you're not going to be a happy man. I was right. In fact, to be frank with you, he had to get somebody else to take me back to where I was supposed to be. His wife, I was supposed to have a meeting with her to talk to her about changing her membership. She'd been sprinkled. She was an elder in the Presbyterian church. She had this faith-only religion. Oh, man, she was all wired up. He decided that that wasn't what he wanted to have done. Now, her soul's on his hands. But what about somebody in the Church of Christ who thinks they're in a position of responsibility, holding up a different teacher, a different scholar, a different preacher than one of the apostles of Jesus Christ, and a thus saith the Lord? Unfortunately, they don't think that the blood of Christ will work, that the plan of God will be successful, and that what Jesus taught will draw men. And therefore, they've changed the venue. We won't do that here. If Christ won't bring them in the door, we have no other means to get them here. If the gospel of Christ is not what they're converted to, they won't be converted to our fabulously handsome good looks or our repertoire of fine words. We only have one thing to say: Jesus Christ and Him crucified. And that's all we'll do. If you're here and need to respond to the invitation tonight, Jesus still teaches, he that believeth and is baptized shall be saved. We invite you to come as we stand and sing.